of a milkshake is very strange, because it wasn't like they all went to McDonald's and got the milkshakes. Rather, it seemed like they were getting poured out from like some kind of cooler. You know what I mean? Like, and just into like, styrofoam cups to be thrown at the fascists, or in this case, gay Asian journalists who want to know if there's evidence of these hate crimes. And as it turns out, there was at least one crime against a gay man, and it was against him.
Yes, we got his head bashed.
Oh, yeah. We linked in the show notes, and you can see the pictures. And the media has been behaving in, again, the most shameful manner. A lot of members of the corporate press are just either ignoring this or sort of wringing their hands, wondering whether or not it's okay. And, one of the person, The Guardian, the reporter for The Guardian who reported on the demonstration is the same person who, in the opinion section of the same newspaper, talks about how effective they are at stopping fascism. And so Michael Malice has been livid about this, especially because conservatives are acting like still can't wrap their heads around this power differential, where they're seeing people get beaten in the streets, and then they're like, this will show the world that the liberals are the real, oh man, the media isn't reporting on this. Don't they see what's happening? Are they crazy? Are they on drugs? Some kind of bias.
A tweet just today that proves Malice's point, where Andy No posted on Twitter that he says, quote, "I was holding a container of fruit with both hands, then suddenly I just dropped it. It landed all over my feet and floor. I looked down and couldn't help but think this had to do with my brain injury. Maybe I'm wrong. The attackers robbed me of confidence in holding my own." The idea being that right now, when you get your head smashed in, he's sitting at home going, I just dropped this plate of food. Is that just an accident, or am I having severe neurological problems? And people on Twitter are sharing it, going this is the funniest thing, because they took all context out of it and they changed it to make it sound like he dropped something and he's acting like it's this crazy thing. And they said the parody quote was, "I was just walking to the bathroom, then suddenly just shit myself. It landed on my feet and floor. I looked down and couldn't help but think this had to do with the brain injury," etc., etc. They've robbed me of confidence in holding my own sphincter tone. And they're all like, this is hilarious, blah, blah, which proves Michael Malice's point. These are people, he has to point out to conservatives, they want you dead. Mm-hmm. At the very least, they would have no problem laughing as you're pulled away to a gulag.
Yes.
The idea that, maybe they wouldn't pull the trigger on you or bash you with a bike lock, but when they see it happen, at the very least, they will either think it's funny or they will think, oh, whatever. The best you'll get out of them is a shoulder shrug, but they're certainly not going to get upset or fight for your right to say whatever that idea of, I don't like what you have to say, but I'll defend with my death, your right to say it. None of them think even anything in the same moral universe as that.
And in fairness, I wouldn't fight to defend them either. So
I don't consider Antifa a political movement, because my understanding of them is that the people who go to Antifa things, they're just they're the stereotypical Trump supporter, except they're left-wing politics, which is they're young white guys who want to engage in violence for its own sake.
Yeah. And normal avenues of violence
are denied to them, so this is a thing they can do.
What are they going to do? Get into sports?
Yes. The politics it's a cover for what they really are, which is we're the kind of guys who, if this was the 50s, we'd be going to the 20s, we'd be going to lynchings, but we're not allowed to do that. So, if this was the 50s, we might go, gay bashing, but we're not allowed to do that. So what can we do? Where can we engage in wanton violence against someone who can't fight back? Well, we can go to these protests and hope to run into some old man in a red hat, and we can bash his head in with a bike lock. And in doing so, take out our own personal frustrations that have literally nothing to do with politics, have to do with dad didn't hug me, whatever. I got an earring in high school and my dad didn't like it, so now I'm going to beat up this old man. It's not a political movement. It's just a bunch of losers with anger problems.
Yeah. I almost forgot one thing. In that tweet thread, he said something that I found very interesting, because it shows, again, that the left has a better idea in this regard of what rational right-wingers should think than the right does. Because Stanislav says, unlike Antifa doxing efforts, which are used to publicly shame fascists, Doxing by supremacists is designed to threaten the person being exposed because there's no social or cultural shame to being opposed to bigotry. Now, the first reading of that is like, oh, wow, so he's saying it's okay for leftists to do this, but it's not okay for rightists to do this, right? It's a classic, if liberals didn't have double standards, they wouldn't have any standards at all. But no, think about it, read it a second time and think about what he's really saying. He's saying if when we observe a leftist doxing someone, it's reasonable to assume that he doesn't intend for it to escalate to violence. When he doxes you, it's reasonable to think that he just wants you to lose your job, which is apparently better. But to him, when a right-winger doxes you for being a leftist, the only rational assumption is that they want to kick your ass. Like, how would you get fired from your job for being on the left? That doesn't make any sense. Why would the only reason to dox me is to physically hurt me? What else would it? Otherwise, you're wasting. But he's wrong. You see, the right really seems to think that if we just dox leftists, they'll lose, like it'll just work the same for them. And so Stanislav is like, this is clearly an act of violence. These people are, it's like, no, actually, Stanislav, you're wrong. These people are retarded.
Sounds like he was projecting there.
No, I don't think it was. I mean, in a sense that he was saying Antifa isn't violent, but it's still, even if we grant, whether or not we grant that premise, it still is correct. Doxing can work its magic non-violently when you're on the, but it's a totally useless tool for a rightist unless it's backed by violence. And so the fact that the right keeps using it as a tool, it must be that they plan to use violence. What he doesn't realize is that the right really is that irrational. Oh yeah, so there were talks of like Donald Trump, I don't know, like doing a crackdown, declaring martial law or something. Like Michael Malice was even saying that Donald Trump should just send in, I guess, the National Guard to restore order in Portland. Because that's how it always is. Whenever it's left-wingers that are winning, the government doesn't have the training or the manpower to stop all these protests. But whenever the right, for better or for worse, starts to win, suddenly, the police go Super Saiyan. You saw this in Charlottesville, where the right outnumbered the left, and when it came to street brawls, were winning, so to speak. And the police kind of had to do a sort of hasty response to really funnel the protests at each other. But they couldn't handle it. But the reason the police were not prepared to handle it was because they expected the left to outnumber the right. Right? They didn't expect people to actually show up. Had they known that the right would actually show up in force, then they either wouldn't have allowed the protest, or they would have managed the protest properly to ensure that the right would have been stopped by the cops.
Yeah.
Right. But instead, thinking that the right was less numerous than they were and less prepared than they actually were, they simply herded them into an Antifa crowd of roughly equivalent size. And so, there's a guy named Joe Biggs, who I have no idea who he is.
He works for Alex Jones in some capacity.
Okay. So Joe Biggs, who works for Alex Jones, and he's like one of these veterans that sells T-shirts. He's involved with 3%ers and such. And he said, he's spoken with ex-cop groups and ex-special forces, Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, and he says Titans of Liberty. And he says he has 1,000 men showing up to Portland, and they'll grow in size to meet with new organizations sick and tired of Antifa. These streets are American streets, and this country belongs to us and not socialists and not communists. And we will take the streets everywhere Antifa thinks they run shit. We will find you. We will outnumber you. You're cowards. No more attacking innocent men and women. I took an oath years ago to protect my country against enemies foreign and domestic. That time has come. Share this everywhere, brothers and sisters. Joe Biggs' Twitter got suspended for hate speech. Also, his website where he sold his T-shirts. Yeah, his website lost its hosting. Again, hate speech. This was on July 3rd. Literally within days. It's like, you know what it's like? For those of you who watch SpongeBob, that episode where he finally got allowed into the salty spittoon and then it just cut to him in the hospital. I'll show you what's going to happen, Antifa. This ends today. And by the time you finish your sentence, all your social media has been just totally obliterated. And so people are calling that boomer brawl. And of course, this never occurred. Speaking of vaguely patriotic symbols getting seen as hate speech, Nike bent the knee to Colin Kaepernick. Because on the 4th of July, Nike was going to release a shoe that had the Betsy Ross flag. So it's not the normal United States flag with 50 stars. It's the one with 13 stars in a circle. Most of our audience is American and has seen this. They probably know what I mean. And it was going to be on the back of the shoe. Colin Kaepernick said that it was a symbol of white supremacy. So Nike apologized and took it down. They canceled the shoe line on Kaepernick's word. Now, what happened to stand for something even if you lose everything? Nike took a knee.
And their stock prices went up.
Yeah, and their stock prices went up. Again, where the right says, well, get woke, go broke. And sometimes, yes, get woke, go broke works when you're selling to, when your target audience are people who are sort of right-wing apolitical, where they want no politics in it because they're conservative and they know that when politics enters things, it'll just make it worse. Get woke, go broke doesn't apply to Nike, right? Nike is not selling to working class white people or people who want ethics in gaming journalism. So it makes sense that Nike would sell more when they kowtow to the left.
Jonah Goldberg actually made a good point about this. I forget where. He said that, in the New York Post is where I see it. And he said that what their bungling did was they turned the Betsy Ross flag into a hate symbol.
Oh, Nike made it into a hate symbol, or?
Yes. No one that never entered into a conversation this was a hate symbol until now they've pulled it for being offensive. And now instantly it's like the Betsy Ross flag is a controversial symbol. All because Colin Kaepernick said it is. Talk about trying to remain relevant. Like, Colin Kaepernick, I know it's easy, and Republicans do this. They'll say, oh, these people, like Colin Kaepernick, he's on the other side of the political spectrum, so he's a dumb celebrity, doesn't know anything. It seems obvious, though, in this case that Colin Kaepernick is a dumb celebrity, doesn't know anything. Like the idea that, well, the Betsy Ross flag is a hate symbol. Why? Well, because I don't like it. Like, what does he know about the Betsy Ross flag? He said because certain groups use it. It was very vague. He doesn't really have anything to back it up. It's just that...
I mean, you can show, right? I'm sure if you went to any, right-wing rally, right, where there's, where there's Oath Keepers or Three Percenters or whatever, if you're the kind of person who thinks that the Three Percenters are a hate group, or any kind of white supremacist militia or whatever, then it makes sense to think that. The thing that makes
my point is that's
that's stupid.
A supreme lack of knowledge.
Yes.
I'm not saying I don't understand it. I understand why someone in this world, in that bubble, without any historical understanding would come to that conclusion, but coming to that conclusion outs you as a retard.
Yes. But a lot of what I see some like boomer is pointing out, like, Betsy Ross personally was a Quaker and anti-slavery, so how can the flag be racist? Yeah, that's like saying, like, how can the swastika be a hate symbol if the Buddhists are all about love and peace? Like, clearly the association of the swastika with hate is not about the original designer, to who you see using it in the present.
Yes. It's part of the war on normal people. Now, again, as libertarians, we don't have any special, we're not flag wavers, let's put it that way. At least not the American flag. And I think it's kind of an ugly flag. I don't particularly like it. The Betsy Ross flag, I think, is an improvement in the American flag. Aesthetically, there are other flags that are more controversial that I think, devoid of all context, look better if you're going to use red, white, blue, and stars as a flag. Let's just put it that way. So I'm not a big fan of the American flag. I don't like the flag waving. I don't like the sort of silly, empty, vapid level of patriotism of it all. But this is part of that thing where if you're a norm who has been raised to respect and admire the American flag, and now it's being turned into a hate symbol because basically elites, because millionaires and multi-billion-dollar corporations have suddenly decided overnight this is a hate symbol. That's got to be really weird to you. And it would cause a lot of upsetness, which will be treated as racism when you get upset about it.
Yeah.
And that's going to cause more upsetness because you're not allowed to be upset that what you consider the symbol of Americana and freedom, and especially for a certain class of boomer who's more left-wing, you consider the American flag a symbol of, like, ending slavery and giving people rights that they didn't used to have, etc. So to you, this is really coming out, it's a sandbag coming out of left field. When on the 4th of July, you're told that, like, the American flag is a hate symbol. You don't really know what you're supposed to do with that. Like, how do you move forward from there? What are you supposed to do? And it's this weird thing where they're shrinking the area for normal people to do things that are normal. And I don't know what they expect to, like, what is going to be the outcome of that? The last time they did this, the last big event was Donald Trump becoming president.
Yeah.
Like,